In today's video, I'm going to go over how to properly handle objections, and I'll also be going over a few different examples like the spouse objection when someone tells you that they want to think about it or that it's not a right time, or if they tell you that they want to keep shopping around. This way you can increase your close rate and have an 80 to 90% close rate just like I do. Now with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into the video. An objection is basically just a cover as to what's really holding these prospects back from moving forward with your service. So what you have to do is get really good at understanding first, what question do you have to ask in order to get to the solution of what's holding them back. But then second, you need to figure out the softest way to deliver these questions so that way you don't put sales pressure on people. And that's one thing a lot of people can do wrong is maybe they handle objections, but they do a really bad job of delivering the questions and they put sales pressure on people, which is not a good thing to do. One of the main reasons why people have a really low close rate when it comes to their sales process is because they don't even really handle objections in the first place. A lot of the times, at least for me, I may go through 5 different objections before I actually get someone to close, and that's perfectly normal. And as your sales process gets better, you're slowly going to handle less objections. And throughout my sales process, I mean, a lot of the times I have some calls where I don't have to handle any objections at all. But my point is in the beginning, and even when you are getting good at sales, you're always going to have to be persistent and handle objections. And that's one of the most important things when it comes to your sales process is be persistent. Don't be pushy, but be persistent on those calls, and don't get off the call until you know that there's a 0% chance that they're ever going to move forward with your service. If that's the case, they come back with an objection, you give them a solution, and they keep coming back with just excuses as to why they aren't moving forward, then that's your sign as to when you need to move on, because it may not be the right time for that person. Now, as far as the first example of an objection, we're going to break down one of the most popular ones, which is the spouse objection. A lot of the times people just let those prospects off the call and they just move on to the next person. But what you need to do is be able to push those limits a little bit and figure out exactly what it is that they want to talk to their spouse about. That way you know what you need to tell them in order to incentivize them to move forward on that phone call. And the way this looks is someone tells you, I'm interested, or yeah, it sounds good, I just want to talk to my wife about it. What you want to do is basically get their guard down. A lot of the times on a sales call, people have a guard up because they don't want to be sold. And they can sense that you're trying to sell them something. So what you need to do is say, completely understand, makes sense, take the time to talk to your husband or your wife about it. Why don't we just schedule a follow-up call in the next day or two? That way we can at least hop back on the phone and I can go ahead and answer any questions that you guys may have. Does that sound good? And they'll say yes. And that's basically step 1. That lets their guard down, and it also gives you a backup because it schedules in a follow-up call. And you need to get a day and a time confirmed. Once you have that, get it confirmed, send them a calendar invite, do everything. Then what you do is say, okay, perfect, I've scheduled in for tomorrow at 3 p.m. And real quick, just to make sure I'm fully prepared for our call tomorrow, I guess what is it exactly that you're wanting to speak with your husband or wife about, just so I can make sure I have all the information together for you tomorrow. And that's when they'll tell you the objection. So it could be price, it could be value, it could be that they want to shop around, but that's what gives you the answer that you're looking for. And that's when you basically have to overcome whatever objection that is. If it's price, then you need to handle the price objection. If it's value, handle the value objection. If they're trying to shop around, you need to be able to shift that objection into your favor and figure out exactly what it is that would make them move forward with one company over the other. So that way you kind of know what you need to do and say and what they need to see in order to move forward with you. So that's the first example of the spouse objection. Get their guard down, schedule that follow-up call, then from there, figure out what they want to think about, and that's how you'll handle that objection. Another one is people may tell you they just want to think about it. If you get that objection, sometimes it can be an issue with your sale up until that point, meaning maybe you didn't ask good qualifying questions, or maybe you didn't build enough value, so they're really not interested. And by them thinking about it, they just don't have enough information to think about, and they're just not really sold on it. So it could be an issue with your sales process, but let's say in this example, you do a great job with your sale, and they tell you, hey, I still want to think about it. If that's the case, then again, take some time to think about it. Why don't we just go ahead and schedule a follow-up call in the next day or two? That way you have some time to think about it, and then we can hop back on the call and I can answer any questions you have. Sound good? And again, people will say yes. From there, get the call scheduled in, and it's the same exact thing as a spouse objection. All you're going to say is, and I guess in particular, like, what is it that you really want to think about, just so I can make sure I can provide all that information to you on our call tomorrow at 4 p.m., whatever time it was. And again, they'll tell you, and then your goal is to overcome that objection. Now, you'll notice that a lot of the times it's very similar. Like, all you have to do is ask the right questions, figure out what it is they want to think about. What is it going to take in order to move forward with you over another company? And your job is to basically give solutions in order to close that job or overcome whatever objection that was. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say that you're pitching a service that's $3,000, and they come back and they say, oh, it's out of their budget. Maybe their budget was $1,800. Sometimes people will just let that sale go, but instead what you can do is figure out a service that you can sell to them that costs $1,800. And just by doing that and pitching high and asking what their budget is, you can work your way a little bit lower, and you can still close an $1,800 job, which is $1,800 more than you had before. And for me, one thing that allowed me to do so well with the sales strategy is I'm very hungry to go out and close as many jobs as possible and collect as much cash as possible. So I'm never really going to let somebody go as long as it makes sense financially. Obviously, if it's something that's $200, it just doesn't make sense to do that. But if I'm pitching something that's $3,000 and I can pitch an alternative service that's, say, $1,800, where, okay, it's not the same exact service at $3,000, but I can figure out what was important to them, and I can repitch an alternative at $1,800, close them for that. Maybe it takes less time. It still makes sense to do that, and I still close the job from asking the right questions. So your goal when it comes to handling objections is always get to the root of the problem, figure out their exact situation, and figure out what you need to do in order to get that job closed. One objection that a lot of people run into is when people are shopping around, they're getting different quotes, and they're not 100% sold on your service yet. And sometimes people just freeze up and they don't really know, like, how to handle that objection. And what I always like to do is, in the beginning of my calls, when I'm qualifying a prospect, I always like to ask them, I mean, what makes now a good time? What makes now a good time to look into whatever service this is that you're selling? And that's going to basically allow them to sell themselves on why they are looking at your service right now at this point. So that way you can keep that in mind. You can bring that back up in the future when you're handling objections. Now, if someone says, oh, I appreciate it, I'm still shopping around getting some other quotes, then what you want to do is ask them, I completely understand. I guess, what would it take for you to go with one company over the other? Is it the best price? Is it the best value? Like, I guess, what exactly is it that you're looking for? And when they come back, they'll tell you what they're looking for in order to be sold. So as long as it makes sense, then your goal is basically to just fit your service into their terms. So let's say it's, the cheapest price. Then what you can do is try and repitch your service with, like, an irresistible offer. Obviously, it depends on the situation. Sometimes you may want to learn a little bit more as to why they're looking for the cheapest price, and maybe you can convince them to purchase a service that's a little bit more expensive. But if they're looking for the best price, then pitch them with an irresistible offer. Typically, something like this, we normally charge about $2,700 for. But honestly, if you were to move forward today, just while we're on the call, so that way we can earn your business, and I can make sure that, let's say you're selling paint protection film on a vehicle, that way I can make sure your car is fully protected by the time you leave here. Instead of $2,700, I'd be open to doing it for $2,450 or whatever it is. So you're giving them a discount, incentivizing them to move forward today. And if they were to think about it or were to leave, then they're not going to have that offer or access to that offer anymore. So it'll kind of incentivize them to move forward then. But if they're looking for the best value, then figure out exactly what that value is that they're looking for. They want this service and this service and this service. And if it makes sense, then you can form a package around that, and you can repitch based on what they want. So now you're specifically pitching them on exactly what they want, and you're going to have a higher close rate because of that. So those are a few different examples of objections, common objections that people run into. And one last thing that I want to touch on is what happens if you can't get over the objection. How should you proceed forward over the next, say, 30 days, 15 days, whatever it is, like in the future, how should you proceed? And what I like to say is always first get a point of confirmation. If you can't close someone on the call, you've gone through everything, can't close them, schedule a follow-up call regardless and get that point of confirmation. What's a good day and what's a good time? And if they try and push it out a week, then figure out, okay, why are they pushing it out a week? Maybe they're on vacation and that's a logical reason, then what you're going to do is go in your CRM, you're going to add a task to basically set a reminder for you to follow up with them a week from now. But what you need to do is basically just start following up with these prospects consistently. And like for the first 30 days, you should basically follow up with prospects every single day. There's a study, and 44% of business owners don't call a lead if they don't answer after the first time. So that's 44% of people who are just missing out on at least 80% of these jobs, because there's another study showing that 80% of jobs close within the first 14 days of follow-up. So if you're not following up and you're not being persistent, you're missing out on so many jobs. So if you get on a sales call, you handle all the objections correctly, or maybe you don't and you just can't close them, then the next step is to pick up the phone the next day and start dialing. Or if they tell you, oh, I'm interested, but I want to think about it, and you get off the phone with these people, or maybe this has happened in the past before you watch this video, pick up the phone, start calling those prospects, and try and re-spark their interest on that service, and use this information that you've learned from how to structure your objection handling. And I have other videos breaking down a whole sales process. Put together a proper sales process, like write down how to qualify prospects, how to build value, and how to objection handle, and use all that information you've learned to start re-pitching all of your past leads and past customers. The biggest piece of advice to see success in sales is going to come down to consistency. You need to be consistent. You need to be very persistent as well. So like consistent with calling and following up and working these deals, and then persistent when you're on those calls handling objections. You have to continuously push through until you get to the root of that problem. So that's kind of a brief breakdown on my process of handling objections, a few examples of some pretty popular objections. If you have any other objections, feel free to comment below, and I'm happy to give you some feedback on those or possibly make another video on them. But if you do want more help and more training on sales and marketing and content, different things like that, I have a monthly community. It's in the description of this video, and it's completely free for the first 7 days. But if you want more information, click the link in the description of this video. Go ahead, join my monthly community. Again, it's completely free for the first 7 days, so it's literally zero risk for you. Go through there and just start learning. Learn how to increase your lead flow, how to use content to increase lead flow without spending money on ads. And you can also access a sales training in there as well that kind of breaks down the whole sales process, objection handling, everything like that. So that's going to be it for this video though. If there's any other videos you want me to cover, go ahead and comment down below. Other than that, I will see you in the next video.